Johnson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Thank you for calling me to speak in this important debate. It's a great pleasure to follow the member for Gateshead and my honourable friend, the member for Suffolk, and indeed to speak in a debate briefly attended by my old comrade, the member for Clwyd South, who is now no longer with us. He seems to have left the chamber, but he defeated me soundly in 1997, so living up to his nickname of Jones the Vote, and a very great honour it is to be sharing the chamber with him now. I want to pay tribute, as is conventional in these speeches, to my predecessor, Michael Heseltine. As many in South Oxfordshire and elsewhere have not hesitated to point out, he is a very hard act to follow, and I approach this moment with much the same sense of self-doubt as Simba in The Lion King. For the benefit of honourable members who have not seen Walt Disney's film The Lion King, there is a poignant moment when Simba is following Mufasa across the veld, and he compares his own paws with the vast paw prints left by that great beast, and those very much are my feelings today. I have no arboretum in South Oxfordshire, merely a sort of lopsided laurel. I struggle to run one magazine, where Michael told me that at the last count he had 267. He served the people of South Oxfordshire well for 26 years, and in that time he was one of the biggest figures of our political landscape. As Secretary of State for the Environment, he liberated millions from the captivity of state-owned and state-controlled housing. When some members of this House were unilateralist, he stood out against the Soviet menace that is now almost forgotten, and he played his part in the end of the Cold War. He worked tirelessly in the 1980s for the people of Liverpool and other deprived areas, and insofar as there is now a Canary Wharf, or Hezegrad, as it is now called, a great city that has risen in the docklands, it is thanks to his energy and his drive. It is fair to say that we did not agree over every detail of European policy, but there was far more, Madam Deputy Speaker, that united us than that divided us. And even when he was Deputy Prime Minister, he was acknowledged everywhere in South Oxfordshire to be an excellent constituency MP. And what a constituency it is. There may be some in this House who are under the impression that Henley is just the town of Henley, so it may be helpful if I give them a little guided tour. Suppose you were travelling on the M40, and just before Junction 6, you suddenly come to that dramatic cutting, that Khyber Pass of the Chilterns, and ahead of you, spread like a land of dreams, is the plain of South Oxfordshire. That, roughly speaking, is my constituency. And that, of course, is the view that Jude the Obscure saw when he came to that spot and dreamt of education. Far in the distance, on a clear day, you can just make out the spires of that ancient university town, now in need, I think, of some protection from senior figures in the Labour government. Away to the south, you see the Whittenham Clumps, famously painted by Constable, and, of course, the towers of Didcot Power Station, which were not. And if unlike Jude, you then turn south on Junction 6, you would come to a small town of Watlington, with its first-rate fish and chip shop and venerable town hall. Now, you would not want to have a car crash in Watlington, because apart from anything else, the government has closed the local cottage hospital, a fate that has befallen many cottage hospitals across this country. But members opposite will be, of course, delighted to know that that hospital is now likely to be rebuilt, thanks to an enormous, concerted, private initiative by the people of the area. I don't know whether that is in accordance with government policy. These days, it's very hard to tell, but let's hope it is. But even if you were not injured, in that car crash, you would certainly not want your car to be out of action for very long in Watlington. You might, for instance, have an urgent appointment in Tame to the north, and your car you might not want to stump up for the petrol. Many of my constituents find it very difficult to afford the cost of petrol these days, as the Honourable Member for Suffolk South was saying. And don't be under any illusions about those constituents. You might want to use the bus. Well, I have news for you. If you try to get a bus from Watlington to Tame, you find you can only get one on Tuesdays, and then you can only come back on Saturdays. But let us suppose you do succeed in doing so. One way or another, you get there. You will find in Tame a vibrant market town, which holds regular farmers' markets of the kind that the Honourable Member for Gateshead was describing, and wonderful events they are, and you'll find many farmers there and hunting. Now, fortified, armed with some produce from that farmer's market, you then might meander down back south towards, well, let's suppose you get a bit lost. And if you were lucky, you'd end up at a pub in a place called Ewelme, where Chaucer's niece is buried, and therefore has a claim to be the centre of English literature and language. And you'll find a wonderful pub there called the Shepherd's Hut, which sells very good ale and very good food, and all the rest of it is doing very, very well. Unlike, I may say, many other pubs in the area which are not so lucky and which have been closing down in great numbers, as honourable members across the House will know. One of the reasons, of course, is that people are worried about drink driving and the punitive measures taken by the police. Now, I of course support all measures to deter reckless driving, but I want to make in this maiden speech one legislative proposal: that the Chancellor, who I'm disappointed to say is not here, should offer a tax break for Breakspear's 2.5, which is a newly developed beer, which I've sampled myself and I'm sure the House is utterly delicious. Breakspear's 2.5, you can drink 3 pints of this without coming near exceeding the limit, and I think it would be a very good thing if it was taxed at an appropriate rate to encourage sobriety when driving, and to do something to help local pubs which are closing down at such a rate across this country, and those who have the Chancellor's ear may be inclined to pass that on to him. Thus fortified, you pass through many scenic villages in South Oxfordshire, places which, as the Honourable Member for Suffolk South has already pointed out, post offices are closing and which are suffering many varieties of unsuspected rural hardship, until eventually you arrive south in Henley, the town that gives its name to my constituency, famous, of course, for its regatta, bringing back a great haul of gold at the recent Sydney Olympics, and doing something, of course, to redress the bullion that was wantonly disposed of on the market by the Chancellor recently. And, of course, scene this week of a most wonderful festival, which I commend to all members of this House. Now, not everywhere in my constituency is as lucky as Henley. There are pockets of genuine deprivation, there are problems of poverty, and there are problems of prosperity. For every affluent estate agent in South Oxfordshire, and there are quite a few, there are dozens, if not hundreds, of young people who cannot afford housing in that area and whose needs must be attended to. I want to say, in conclusion, Madam Deputy Speaker, why I am in politics and what I've done this sort election for. We all say in our pious way that we want to make a difference. We want to do our bit for our country. And of course, that's true. And I hope you won't mind if I offer that piety today. And it's perhaps especially true for someone who spent a lot of time sitting up there. I'm not supposed to mention that place, am I? I'm not supposed to mention that place. I'm so sorry. Forgive the solecism on this occasion, Madam Deputy Speaker. For someone who has been a journalist for so long, I do not condemn those who have taken the socialist view. I don't know whether they are still socialists, but I don't condemn those who have believed in socialism. I can see why they do. I can see why they're motivated to root out injustice and to build a better society. I just happen to think that conservatism offers a better and a broader understanding of human nature, which is why it has been so successful over the last 200 years. And which is why it is now so sedulously imitated. I believe there is a hidden wisdom in old ways of doing things. I believe, broadly speaking, that if you get the state off people's backs and allow them to get on with their lives, they will not only be, broadly speaking, more contented, but they will also generate more of the wealth that society will always need to help the poorest and those who genuinely cannot help themselves. Now that is one nation Toryism, and I believe it is a wholly reasonable creed. If I have one criticism of the way this motion has been framed today, and of course I don't, it is that we have talked too much as though there was a great insulation between the crisis in the countryside and metropolitan England, metropolitan London, or whatever it happens to be. The simple fact is, Madam Deputy Speaker, that if you look at this morning's newspapers or yesterday's newspapers, you will find that musicals are closing in this town because of the foot-and-mouth crisis. The crisis in this country, the crisis in the countryside, is one that affects everyone. That is a point I make today in this House for the first time as member for Henley-on-Thames, and I've been proud, I am proud, that I've been given the chance to make it again, as I will, on behalf of all my constituents in the months and years ahead.
Mr. David Hamilton.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I do not intend to attempt to try and follow the entertainment that we just received there now. What I would say is, as a socialist, one of the things I do congratulate the honourable member for Henley for the comments that he made, and indeed the contribution that he made for his predecessor. The predecessor, if I remember right, was the person that closed 32 pits down throughout Britain, and of course had a hairstyle not unlike himself. And I think in that sense, I'll watch with interest over the next 4 or 5 years how we can work together on a number of issues. On the